All right, everyone, it's time to talk about the Bavarian election and also something that happened a couple days before that, which is that an anti-AfD rally was going to be held, I think, in Berlin. They were expecting like 40,000 people. It was over 200,000. It was massive. We're talking like Martin Luther King, I Have a Dream-sized crowd. And quite unexpected, but it's not really that out there. It's not really that strange, and I'll tell you why. And then we look at the Bavarian election results. They're fairly obvious too. AfD won the day, massively increased their proportion of the vote, and then the Greens also grew considerably, the far left. The old center got half the votes that it did the last time around, literally around 50% of how many votes they had literally in the last Bavarian municipal or provincial elections. I'm not sure what your term is over in Germany for that. The reason for this is what I've been saying now for 2 or 3 years, which is the death of the center. What happens? The population is under stress. It doesn't feel that that stress is being addressed by the establishment, and therefore anti-establishment forces are growing. The additional problem has begun now, which is that the left and the right are feeding off one another's energy. The right grows, the left says to the establishment, ban the Nazis. The establishment can't ban the Nazis. Too many people are part of AfD. They're not actually a fringe movement at all. They're basically nativists. So they can't do anything about it. What are they going to do? Kill off, 10 million people? Okay. Well, maybe that's in the MO of Merkel's family lineage. I don't know if Merkel has the balls for it. Then the left rises up because they're like, well, the establishment's not going to save us from these fucking forsaken fascists. We're going to have to take matters in our own hands. Hail the Green Party. Hail communism or something. The left grows. The right, including the center right, looks at them and says, we're starting to get nervous. Hey, Merkel, are you going to do anything about the fact that these commies are going through the streets throwing bricks and stuff? Oh, we can't do anything about that. And so the center right starts to get dragged towards AfD, growing that coalition. The center left starts to get dragged towards the Greens or like their Communist Party or something. Who's left out in the rain? It's the centrists. It's the death of the center, what I've been predicting for Europe now for a number of years. I'm beginning to think that it was a little bit too prophetic and a little bit too spooky. Here's the thing. There is no way the establishment can address these issues. They're hamstrung. They're losing power so quickly they may not even really be able to govern. At that point, the outsiders win. What's going to happen? Merkel's group or somebody else from the center has to partner with AfD or with the far left. In which case you have a fundamental mass overhaul of German politics and of German society. It will cause massive social alienation on the other side. It will cause a period of counter-revolutionary sentiment. There will be violence. I wouldn't predict Weimar 2.0 necessarily because we don't have economic stressors nearly on the same order as the 20s or 30s. What we do have, though, is a lot of moral stressors and a lot of diplomatic stressors regarding migration, refugee movements, I think the direction of Europe in general. You also have more Eurosceptics now in Germany. Euroscepticism, oddly enough, even though on the surface it seems like the exact opposite, is more common in Western Europe. Europhilia is very common in Eastern Europe. It's just that they don't like the EU's abusive actions towards like Orban in Hungary. They want populism over in Poland, Hungary, the Czech Republic, places like that. They want to hold the EU together because it's economically something that they like. They just don't want the EU to go down the path of totalitarianism because they're used to Soviet rule not long ago. With regards to Merkel's coalition, how are they going to end up governing? They've lost power now for how many elections in a row? They keep losing power. AfD is not going to suddenly stop growing unless the refugee crisis is... What would have to happen in order for AfD not to continue to grow? Because it has been growing, it's obvious their message is working, is resonating, and is even picking up steam. The centrists would have to give in to them and say, okay, we're going to stop accepting refugees, close the border, reform the Schengen area. We're going to go up against the EU authorities, by the way, in order to accomplish this, and end up having to side with Viktor Orban and people that we, even a few years ago, were calling literally Hitler. That's not going to work so well, and it would alienate the far left in Germany. Some 20-30% of the population would probably be very, very unhappy indeed. Extremely unhappy. Well, maybe 10 to 20% probably. Let's put it in that category, along with AfD and maybe the further right sort of pan movement. Probably about 10 to 20%. Now, if you add these two movements together, it's like a third or 40% of the German population. It's not a majority. The majority is still in that center, but the center is going to be unable to solve the problems leading to the growth of these outside groups. At some point, they end up partnering with one. or they give in to them, and then, the same basic effect happens. There is no way out for the established center in Europe. The EU will fail. That's what I'm telling you. In fact, it may fail earlier than I expected. Maybe in the next decade or something, it's going to begin to collapse. Germany may leave the European Union. That would be the end of the European experiment, basically. By the way, that's the best thing that could possibly happen. You would reduce alienation. Now, you can have a national debate over whether you want to be left or right-leaning, have refugees or block refugees, like migration, be very insular. You can have that national debate, but if a post-national authority is making those decisions for you, it alienates the left and the right in your country. It's inevitable that this will happen. Look, by the way, around the world. Old trade deals from the globalist, sort of the post-Carter-Reagan period, they're being torn up. Everything's being reconsidered. We're in a period of significant social and political change. The worst possible worry, this is what the Germans should be worried about. I encourage Germans to back the mild reform, ultimately, of groups like AfD, because something else will come along if they're not capable of achieving their goals, and they will proliferate. They could end up infiltrating and taking over AfD, reforming. AfD has 30% of the vote, and then all of a sudden they switch their platform. Oh, by the way, now we're comfortable with violence. Or the far left could do the same thing. This has happened before in history, too. Of course, within a party, you have a morphing of its ideology. It changes leadership. The people that tend to be more or less powerful, they tend to shift over time. You can get a vast change within one of these groups. So instead of going Weimar 2.0, you should listen to the reformists now, attempt to hammer something out. But the thing is, the center can't do that without alienating one side or the other. That's the first problem. So it will inevitably grow either the left or the right. If right now both of them are growing rather quickly. Even if it addresses the problems, it only can suppress one of those groups, and it draws them closer to it. Ideologically, they'd feel like they lost, and they'd technically be right. The outsiders have already won by pushing these issues into the public consciousness, and they're forcing the centrists to make the same mistakes they did maybe in the 30s. Remember, attempts were made by the majority establishment to infiltrate communist and National Socialist movements in the Weimar days. What have they just done to AfD? Like a month ago, they announced, by the way, we're going to conduct surveillance on this group. We're going to make sure that we have people in their meetings and stuff. Make sure that there's not too much wrongthink. That's not going to go over too well, and it's going to continue metastasizing. Here in the United States, we should be very lucky that reform took the form of MAGA populism as opposed to something that could actually be violent. People who are worried about Trump being a fascist, they'll come around eventually. Trump is reforming the system. They're used to, the old center is extremely globalistic and leans to the left economically. So people who are actually on the left look at Trump and they think that he's really, really far out there. He's not. He represents the last paradigm. He represents the center right of the prior paradigm, or even the center left. In a way, he's like an 80s era Democrat before they ended up fundamentally overhauling their message to dwell on wedge issues as a reaction to Reagan's success. That's really what it was about. Reagan outflanked the old Democrats in the Carter vein, who had been more moralistically liberal. Carter basically was an evangelical plus welfare and solar panels, if you think about it. That platform stopped working when the Reaganites came in. Therefore, in order to combat that, in order to even defeat Herbert Walker, what'd they have to do? And they barely pulled this off with the help of a strong third party showing Bill Clinton, younger, less interested maybe in the evangelical thing, but willing to pander to his southern wedge issue voters. More palatable towards the wedge issue era and towards the cable generation. No, really, the MTV generation. Oh yeah, I smoked weed. Don't worry, I didn't inhale, Mom and Pop. Hey, Gen Xers, I used marijuana. Hey, baby boomers, I didn't smoke it. I didn't actually inhale, but these kids, I want them to vote for me. Wink, wink, nudges. Hillary Clinton used to do this. She did this when she was running for the Senate in New York. Thank goodness over here we've already restored civility. Yeah, we really have. People think that the United States is like falling apart into chaos. No, it's not. No, you're about to see some chaotic midterms. People will calm down. Don't fucking worry quite so much. But in Europe, you should be fucking very worried. And you need to do something about it, because otherwise, the European experiment's already, deader than a doornail. It's going to fall apart anyway into various blocks, or it's just going to shatter like the USSR did, which is the best thing for you and the rest of the world, by the way. The problem is how many people are going to suffer before that reform takes place. Yeah, you should be voting the outsider movements. Left, right, center, who cares? Are the Eurosceptics? Yeah, vote for them. That's about all. Peace out.